Now, Localization Support Fund has released a new study showing that with the right industry development and policy support, an additional 81 million garments per annum could be sourced by South African retailers from local garment manufacturers by the year 2030, increasing local sourcing by 20% and adding nearly 8 billion rand in annual manufacturing output, and also creating up to a whopping 34,000 jobs. Now, the study, commissioned by the LSF and undertaken by Industrial Development Consultancy, BMA, was conducted over a one-year period and included quite an extensive assessment of demand for local sourcing among major South African retailers, as well as the development of commercial business case and action plans to drive localization within the industry. To further this discussion, we're very pleased to be joined by Dr. Irshaad Kathrada. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Localization Support Fund. So Irshaad, I'm sure I've just called you doctor there, but take the credentials. Yeah. Good afternoon. Look, we do appreciate your time with us today. Welcome. So you have dutifully conducted a study on localization in South Africa's garment industry. Please briefly tell us, firstly, why you went on this fact-finding mission, and secondly, what you uncovered. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia, and thanks for having me on the show. So if we take a step back, the garment industry, more broadly the clothing and textile industry, has been quite important to job creation in South Africa for such a long time. If you go back 25 years ago, it employed up to 200,000 people, putting food on the table for families in the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Gauteng, KZN. Now, sadly, for a range of reasons, the South African clothing and textile industry has struggled. And as a result, employment in that industry has also started to dwindle, and it's nowhere near the numbers that it was 25 years ago. So government coming together with stakeholders across the industry, from retailers, manufacturers, and also organized labor, signed what's been referred to as the Clothing, Textile, Footwear, Leather Master Plan. This was about 6 or 7 years ago. 2019 it was signed on the sidelines of the investment conference at the time. Now, the intention was to increase local sourcing up from where it was at the time to about 65%. Incredibly ambitious targets, but what it did is it created this platform of coordination and collaboration between stakeholders across the value chain. And initially, it was actually quite successful. We got up for, in the year that the master plan was signed, retailers were procuring somewhere of the order of about 250 million garments. And within about 3 to 4 years, that got up to about 390 million garments. Now, for some reason, and this is why we wanted to launch the study, it sort of stalled. It stayed at that level. And what we needed to understand is, why were we successful in that beginning part? And where ought we need to focus our strategies and attentions in order to go further in terms of localization? So we commissioned, as you say, this year-long study. It's one of the most comprehensive studies that we know of in the clothing industry, where we started off by surveying the retailers, the major retail groups, the likes of your Mr. Price, the Foschini Group, Woolworths, Pick n Pay, etc., and asked them, if you could localize, where would you want to localize? What are the product areas? What are the prices? What are the various ways that you'd want to do it? We then went and we surveyed manufacturing companies. We had about 200 of South Africa's 400 manufacturers participate in the survey, giving a sense of where the capability and the capacity was. And then the final piece of the study was trying to understand, how do we bridge the gap between manufacturing capacity on the one side and demand on the other side? And this is where effectively our study has gotten to, highlighting, as you mentioned at the top of this, the 81 million garments that are on the table for localization. Now, it doesn't mean that's a silver bullet. We're not going to click our fingers and it's all going to magically happen. But what it gives us is a good sense of where do we need to focus our attentions, our energies. So if I can, there's a few product areas where we see there's a massive opportunity. So the first one is in the denim sector. For various reasons, the fact that more of us are working from home, we're dressing down a little bit more, we're not wearing suits to work in the way that we did. Denims have become a lot more popular in the South African economy. And as a result, there's a real opportunity to localize denims. And we've got some denim production. There's, factories in the Western Cape and in KZN. But we're hearing from retailers, we want more, do more. If you were able to scale up denim production, we would be able to invest in a lot more of that. And so that's a key area of focus that we want to embark upon as an industry with retailers and with manufacturers. The other area is in basic knits, basic T-shirts. There's still a demand for this type of garment in South Africa. And the conventional wisdom is, don't even bother with basic knits. We'll never be as competitive as China, Vietnam, Bangladesh. But actually what we found is that, well, one, that those price differentials between China and South Africa have
Yeah.
begun to narrow.
Yeah.
No longer is that sort of a low-cost labor destination. It's the things are being able to narrow. But we did find that what we need to try and do is scale up our production so that we can reach the levels of competitiveness that the retailers need ultimately to service the consumer. So, as I say, some really excellent opportunities that we'll now be working with industry, and I think we're excited to push it forward because that window for localization is really opening for retailers. I mean, I think the one thing more than the numbers is the willingness we got from retailers to say we do want to localize. It's actually important to our business models. The old pattern of trading where you observe trends in Europe and placed your orders in China and got it on the shelves 3 months later, that no longer works for South African retailers. We need to be much more agile to the South African consumer. We have a unique sense of style and fashion that we're developing in South Africa. That means that as trends change, we need that manufacturing much closer to home.
Absolutely. I'm glad you covered those sectors, Irshaad, because I was going to ask you that. I mean, we saw what the tariffs did to South Africa, specifically the textile industry. Now, 34,000 jobs could be created. That's the part I think every abled, unemployed, yet skilled individual sitting at home and is watching wants to know more about how they can actively be part of the beneficiaries of the fund and its benefits. And how does it work? Who is eligible? I'm looking at your application requirements here. So talk to us about that. What do they need to even start the conversation with LSF?
Sure. So, just talking about the LSF, I mean, we were started about 5 or 6 years ago as a partnership between government and the private sector. So, founded out of government to try and align with government policy, but we funded by the private sector, the likes of your Coca-Colas and Engens and Air Liquide, the industrial gas company. And effectively, our real mandate is to try and mobilize expertise in support of manufacturing. It goes everywhere from trying to identify where the opportunities are and bringing real evidence base to it, trying to bridge that gap between policy intent on the one side and the real economics, if you will, the rands and cents. How do we get capital to flow? And once we've identified where the opportunities are, it's to try and mobilize the stakeholders, the capital towards those ultimate outcomes. So we focus our efforts across the economy in a range of different places, all in manufacturing, because manufacturing is such an important part of the South African economy. And we really believe that so much growth and job creation can come once we can stabilize and expand our manufacturing sector.
All right.
So really the way to work with us, we do have an application process, but we encourage different industries, associations, even individual entrepreneurs to get in touch with us and to talk through some of the ideas and where they see the opportunities. And really what we then try and do is, if it's research that required, we'll bring in the type of expertise that can do that hard research.
All right.
But if it's trying to align the industry and the stakeholders in a particular area, because sometimes what you need is just to put people in a room. In the case of the clothing industry, it's to put the retailers in the room with the manufacturers and with organized labor and say, here's the opportunity, guys. How do we pull it together? And that's a big part of what we do as well.
Irshaad, this is a great initiative. I wish I could talk to you for a whole hour, but unfortunately, I'm out of time. Thank you so much for talking to us. Mr. Irshaad Kathrada there is the CEO of the Localization Support Fund with some great news in terms of localization.